long time ago, subscriber and player at one of my tables, Brady, asked me what my favorite modules were for the virtual tabletop that we both prefer, Foundry Virtual Tabletop. And this video will sort of touch on that, but primarily I'm gonna go over sort of the advantages that virtual tabletops can offer that we might otherwise struggle to be able to bring to life at our tabletop games. Thanks, Brady, for the topic, and thank you to the Tank Class supporters for deciding that this video was one that was worth doing. If you'd like to have a say in what videos show up on your feed, then go ahead and click join down below, and for a few bucks a month you'll get voting rights on what is going to show up next, as well as access to all the videos that I have prepared in advance, which at the moment is 10 videos, I think, as of this recording. But for now, let's get into it and talk about what virtual tabletops do well. One of the things that virtual tabletops make simple that can be a little bit of a challenge at the traditional table is the sharing of art. Whether it's scenic maps or character art or handouts that you want to pass around the table, being able to do so to everybody all at once and letting them have it there in front of their face to keep for as long as they want or don't want is something that virtual tabletops do really well. A module on Foundry that helps with that is Image Hover, which allows you to just put the little character art up in the screen in the corner for whatever you happen to be hovering over so that people can focus on the details whenever they feel like it. A second thing that is really useful is hiding roles while still letting people roll for themselves. Though not every player is terribly comfortable having rolls made on behalf of their character, it can sometimes be a really useful tool to hide things like stealth checks or perception, investigation, search kind of checks so that people don't gain that meta knowledge about how well or poorly they did in their searching in order to determine whether or not they need to call over a friend to also check, even though when they roll a natural 20 they would never ask anybody to come and check their work. Hiding that roll can be really useful. I've got a video on the topic somewhere. Anyway, one thing that is cool is that on a virtual tabletop, using a module like Crash's automatic blind rolls, is that you can set it so that anytime a player rolls one of those things, they don't see the output. The output just comes to the GM. So the player still has the autonomy of feeling like they are the one pushing the button or rolling the dice, while the outcome is still determined behind the screens. And then you can reveal it to them later to show how they rolled. A third thing that goes well is the ability to note conditions on a token. I can't tell you how many times over the decades that I've been playing that I have forgotten that a guy over in a corner somewhere was frightened and thus couldn't do something that he would have otherwise been doing. But with a virtual tabletop where I can add the frightened condition to him, and in some cases go so far as to automate it all out to restrict their choices based on the conditions that I'm putting down on there, having that actually listed on the tokens is really helpful. You can use things like condition rings in live play, which can be really cool but a little cumbersome, but in virtual tabletops it's pretty much base in Foundry, though I use something called DFreds convenient effects to be able to track conditions that are a little outside the norm or spells that I need to keep tabs on, and it just keeps it all organized and functional. Though you wouldn't think that it was necessarily a super big challenge to keep track of movement at the table, given that you can only move so many spaces and all, it can sometimes get a little bit onerous when people are running back and forth and trying to figure out the best path and they forget where they started in the very beginning. A tool like Drag Ruler on Foundry is really useful for being able to count the distance that everybody is going, take into account any optional rules you might be using. Me personally, I'm a big fan of the old alternating 5 and 10 feet for diagonal spaces so that circles that you draw and movement that you draw both cover the same distances. Math just bothers me like that. But regardless of how you're doing it, being able to keep track and see on the screen how far you've moved, whether or not you would need to double move, or whether you're going beyond your movement speed is just useful, and Drag Ruler is a nice option. The fact that it can also remember where you moved and where you started so that if you make any mistakes you can go back to there is also really clutch. As sort of a admission, I am actually really terrible at taking some specific notes at the table. I have a pretty good memory for what happens at game because I find it exciting and enjoyable, but when I forget, I forget. And one of the things that really helps me is having an integrated calendar in the Faerunian calendar that I prefer. And SmallTime and SimpleCalendar are the tools on a virtual tabletop that handle that. I can see as time progresses how much of the day is gone. I can shift time forward for rests, move to other days, and leave notes on individual days that tell me what happened when, so that if I need to find that information out later, I can look back, and it just makes the passage of time and the tracking of that so much simpler. Speaking of making things simpler, something that virtual tabletops just do in base really well that is actually really helpful for making things simple. The sixth item, I guess, is the ability to just roll a bunch of dice all at once, which for me is really helpful for dealing with mobs of huge numbers of foes, or things like the old animate objects spell that created 10 little annoyances that needed to be tracked all at once. Just telling it roll 10 dice for me and being able to figure out what the target number was to be able to hit, kind of Thaco style, and then just 1, 2, 3, 4 hits out of these 10 and move it on and take care of all of their turns all at once was a big boon that tabletops make a lot easier than trying to keep enough d20 at the table for 10 attacks with advantage, and then keeping all those dice organized and set to ones for the best chance of rolling a 20 because I'm superstitious. A seventh cool trick is the ability to have people pass notes in class. Yeah, obviously you can do that regardless, but what I'm thinking of is the module Polygot, which allows you to type in a manner that'll get translated into a gobbledygook language, then get unscrambled by anybody else who controls a token with access to that language. In other words, they speak in Elven and it gets thrown up into some fancy looking script for anybody who doesn't speak Elvish, but anybody who does speak Elvish gets the real thing over on their end. You can replicate this at the table by either passing notes around the old school way or allowing everybody to send text messages, but having access to your phone at a traditional table might be more of a danger than it's worth. You decide. Number 8 is about visual effects, which are not necessary. Obviously, we're supposed to be playing a game of pretend of sorts, and so we're supposed to be able to imagine a certain amount. But, you know, it is very true that some people are just more visual than others. And for the people who are more visual, virtual tabletops have definitely got you covered. I use the module Automated Animations, powered by a Patreon creator, JB2A, that I support. Basically, whenever anybody makes an attack or casts a spell, JB2A and the automated animations kicks in and enables a obvious thrown punch with a sound of a thud as it hits, or the explosive roar of a fireball and a burst of flame on the screen. For some spells, there might be chanting in the background and runes flowing around, but regardless, it adds some visual flair that helps to enhance those moments for our more visually excitable players. Highly recommend JB2A, and if you have a chance to go check them out, if you're running a virtual tabletop, then they are definitely well worth the couple of bucks a month it'll cost you. They're not any kind of sponsor or anything, but tell them I said hi. And number 9 is the ability to import people's character sheets from D&D Beyond into the world where you have access to the live copy that they are playing off of, and being able to get notifications when changes are being made while you're not looking. The modules that handle that are the DDB Importer app that utilizes a Patreon subscription for Mr. Primate's DDB Importer. Definitely another one that is a solid must if you're running Foundry Virtual Tabletop. And the Cautious Gamemaster module that allows you to see when people are changing, whether or not they have or do not have access to certain spell slots and things like that. Being able to look at your players' character sheets on your screen while you're in the middle of play and see what they are and are not tracking, what they have and have not used, is a huge game changer for me personally, and I think probably for a lot of DMs. It's not that I don't trust any of my players, because they are a great bunch and they all do their best. But some things slip past, and when I see on the camera that somebody stepped away but I still need to track some damage that's been taken, I don't have to wait for them to come back for the bathroom to just apply it in absentia and then let them know when they get back. And I don't have to ask anybody to do so trying to figure out how they handle things on their character sheet or hand it up to me for me to figure that out either. A 10th item is the ability to let every player have access to damage reports of the creatures that they're facing without having to interrupt play to get them. I use the module Health Estimate, which means that every time one of my players just cursors over an enemy or ally, they can see whether they're uninjured, barely injured, injured, bloodied, or badly injured in my module, or near death. And that tells them, in addition to the color scaling of the information, just how bad off any individual opponent is comparative to their maximum hit points. I think this is a great addition so that people can see and remember, oh yeah, that guy's the injured one over here, and this guy over here hasn't been attacked by any of my allies yet, so they can pick and choose whether they want to finish that guy off or tangle this other guy up. The 11th thing that virtual tabletops really do that is super hard to represent at the table is the adding of verticality and line of sight. I use the module wall height to set the height on my walls so that they can determine angles for what people can and can't see, and the base program handles line of sight pretty much flawlessly. This essentially allows for you to put out a map and let everybody at the table have their own individual point of view of what they are aware of. And personally, I think that that alone is one of the most powerful abilities. It can come into conflict sometimes with the need to provide sort of an overarching view, but there's easy ways around that, including just making a location token that everybody has viewing rights to, so you can pop it down and let them see in every direction from wherever you wish to. The only warning that I would give on that doesn't happen at a regular tabletop is that if somebody is away from the action, they're stuck listening to you describe everything, but they have no kind of visual cue. They can't see the minis being moved around, so you may want to keep an eye on that for certain situations so that people don't get bored. And there you have it. You've made it to the end and earned yourself some cat videos. But before you melt, if you'd like to get access to 2 months or more of advanced content as well as have choices on what comes up next, then consider hitting the join button below. Your support means a lot because you're awesome. Thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.
Was doing nothing.